Tonight on the fifth chapter, an all-star pitcher looks at the offer to reopen baseball and says, "I'm not playing unless I get mine." Is the 2020 baseball season in jeopardy over money? The Green Bay Packers are the only publicly owned team in American pro team sports. Dennis and Brian tell you which team they'd want a piece of if they were all publicly owned. And 53-year-old Mike Tyson retired from boxing 15 years ago. Now he says he's back. Is the public ready for Iron Mike to return to the ring? Join the conversation by sending your tweets to @DennisFithian and @BChapSports. This is the fifth chapter with Dennis Fithian and Brian Chapman.
He represents the mitten by way of Penn State. When Chapman gets to talking sports, the people can't wait. He represents the mitten. Be a true EMU, but cut Dennis in the fall and his veins bleeding blue. They got respect around the state. When that light turns red, so don't sleep on these dudes. Just invite your friends to cut your nap short and tip your cap for and sit back for the fifth chapter. Brian Chapman, Dennis Fithian. When they open their mouths, they spitting the facts, bro. This ain't even optional, man. You just have to tune into YouTube to watch the broadcast or download it to your phone to peep the podcast. They mix laughter, they get after. It's all captured in the fifth chapter.
That's right, and welcome to the fifth chapter. I am Brian Chapman. He's Dennis Fithian. Time for episode 2. Dennis, are you ready for 5 fantastic chapters?
I am. I used a comb for the first time in at least 10 years on this beard today. So crazy things happening during a pandemic for me.
A comb. Yeah, that's one thing I haven't used a comb. Wow. Since maybe I was in high school or middle school. It's been a long time because I shaved my head. Here's a little fun fact for you. I shaved my head for the first time my second week of college. So that was way back in September of 2003.
I'll say TMI, but I'm the one that led you down that path. So let's get it going. What's up, Detroit?
All right, yeah, thank you guys to everyone who's watching on YouTube or listening to the podcast on Apple, iTunes, Google Play, and Spotify. Make sure that you like, subscribe, and participate in each show by sending your tweets @DennisFithian or @BChapSports. You can also send in a comment during the live stream right here on the side. Let's take a look first, though, at today's book. And as you can see, in the second chapter, we are going to get to which sports team you would like to own if you could own a part of any team. As we all know, the Green Bay Packers are the only publicly traded team in American major pro sports. In the third chapter, Mike Tyson releases a workout video and says, "I'm back. Are you ready for Iron Mike to get back in the ring?" Fourth chapter, a big Dennis Fithian special. Dylan McCaffrey or Joe Milton, who should be the starting quarterback for Michigan? And we do this topic on the day that offensive coordinator Josh Gaddis speaks to the fake news media about the quarterback position. And in the fifth chapter, that's fifth with one F, it's story time with me and Dennis. But let's start off with the first chapter, in chronological order, of course. On Tuesday, we started off the show with the MLB owners' plans to play ball beginning in early July with an 82-game season. All games against teams from your own division or the NL team or the NL teams of that region, meaning the Tigers would not play the Yankees. They would not play the Astros. All 82 games would be against AL Central and NL Central foes. But the big issue was money. Back in March, the players and owners agreed to a deal that would pay the players a prorated salary. If they play 3/4 of the season, they get 3/4 of their pay. In the new deal, the owners want to renege and force the players to take an even bigger pay cut, 2/3 of a prorated salary, because there's not going to be any fans in the stands, and the owners say they would lose a ton of money because they're not going to have fans in the stands. The players, obviously, we predicted they'd want no part of it. A lot of experts predicted they would want no part of it. Last night, Tampa Bay Rays all-star pitcher Blake Snell took it a step further in a video that he posted to Twitch. He was on Twitch last night playing, I believe it was MLB The Show, and he took time out to speak to the fans about why he would want no interest whatsoever in the owner's deal. Here's what he had to say.
No, I'm not splitting no revenue. I want all mine. Bro, y'all gotta understand too, because y'all gonna be like, Bro, Blake, play for the love of the game, man. What's wrong with you, bro? Money should not be a thing. Bro, I'm risking my life. What do you mean it should not be a thing? It 100% should be a thing. If I'm going to play, I should be getting the money I signed to be getting paid. I should not be getting half of what I'm getting paid because the season's cut in half on top of a 33% cut of the half that's already there. So I'm really getting like 25%. On top of that, it's getting taxed. So imagine how much I'm actually making to play. You know what I'm saying? Like I ain't making shit. And on top of that, so all that money's gone. And now I play risking my life. And if I get the Rona, on top of that, if I get the Rona, guess what happens with that? Oh yeah, that's in my body forever. That damage is not gonna be like the damage that was done to my body. That's gonna be there forever. So now I gotta play with that on top of that. So y'all gotta understand, man. For me to take a pay cut is not happening because the risk is through the roof. It's a shorter season, less pay. Like, bro, yeah, man. I gotta get my money. I'm not playing unless I get mine. Okay, and that's just the way it is for me. Like, I'm sorry if you guys think.
So there you go, Dennis. He says that unless he gets his money, he's not playing. He's saying, I got to get mine. Dennis, we know that on the first show, you said you didn't want to hear about these millionaires and billionaires arguing about the money when they're already filthy rich. What do you think about Blake Snell's ultimatum and the possibility of rejecting this pay cut?
Well, what we want to hear is play ball. We don't want to hear everybody wants their money. I want my money. He wants his money. The others want their money. So they got to figure out how to compromise and get that done. I appreciate it. On one side, coming out there, I thought it was interesting what he said. It's not worth it to him to play for, half of his $7 million salary. But then a little bit later on, he talked about how he was worried about the long-lasting effects of possibly the coronavirus. If he had $7 million, the risk would be worth it. Then, that was the only part about it there. Look, he's not going to get a $7. And I think at some point here, this is what the negotiation is about. Can they defer some money down the line? Can they protect the owners in case there's a second wave and they don't have the playoffs? They should be able to figure this out. The quicker they do it, the better, because, bad press and bad mouthing from people like you and I and everybody else, because nobody, what are we going to say? Like, oh, yeah, I side with the owners. I side with the players. These guys need to figure it out and get it done. Like, I get it. They did have a deal. But now the owners are looking at it and saying, man, we might really take a bath here at the end. They need some protection. The players need some protection. They can figure out a deal. But, man, it's only like 2-3 days in of talking about this, and I'm already tired of it.
Yeah, I think that's the most important thing for baseball fans that are getting concerned is they're only a couple of days in, and they basically have until the end of the month to agree on some sort of deal because the plan wants them to start spring training again around June 10th so that around the 4th of July they'll be ready to go. And if they're still haggling about details into June 3rd, into June 5th, into June 8th, then probably by June 10th they won't be ready to go. But I think that the playoffs, one thing you mentioned, the playoffs and a second wave, that's one of the big fears of the players. Because when you think about how they're not going to be getting, the owners are not going to be getting the money from fans coming to games. They're not going to be getting money from concessions and $30 hot dogs and things like that. One thing they are going to be getting money from is the playoffs. And when you add in extra teams, not 10 teams this year, a potential of 14 teams in the playoffs this year, that has the ability for TV contracts to come in and give Major League Baseball more money. These players are concerned that if they take less than the prorated salary and they start taking that extra third of a pay cut so that the league and the players are getting 50-50 and there's a second outbreak that happens in September or October and they have to cancel the playoffs, then that means they're going to miss all that extra money. Whereas if they just stick with the prorated number, then they're getting that money whether they have the playoffs or not. As long as they finish the regular season, then they're going to get that money. So I understand that, and I understand Blake Snell coming out and saying, hey, I don't want to risk coming out there and getting the coronavirus because he says I ain't making bleep. That's not true because even with the owners coming out there, I mean, he's supposed to make $7 million this year. You cut that in half, that's $3.5 million. You cut a third off of that, that's 2.3. Like, I haven't made $2.3 million in my life, but I can understand him saying, I'm not going to play because he signed a 3-year, $50 million extension that begins next year, and then he turns 30 when that contract expires. If he has reduced lung capacity or some other issue because he gets coronavirus, then when he has a chance to get his next monster deal at age 30, he's not going to get that. And I don't know if there's some sort of clause in there that could void his deal if he has coronavirus to save the Rays $50 million. I get that. I just look at what Snell says and how he's so apprehensive, or not even apprehensive, how he's putting his foot down and saying, I'm not playing. I wonder how many other players are this adamant about not playing, and I'm starting to get concerned.
Yeah, I wonder if he says, and I think that whether you agree with him or not, that he can have long-lasting effect if he ends up getting coronavirus. If he came out and said, look, this is a real concern of mine, so I'm going to go forego all of the money, even though he wants his money, I'm going to forego that $7 million this year, and I'm just going to wait till next year. If he could then get into that next part of his contract, I would understand that. I don't know if it moves back another year, if he takes a year off. I mean, these are the kind of things that need to be negotiated for a player, and the league needs to figure that out, the Players Association. These are the kind of things that they need to talk about, because really, if you are, like, and Snell might be just worried about his next contract, there's other players where maybe they're not worried about themselves, but they are worried about maybe they have somebody at home. I know one of the players he's worried because his wife had asthma. You might have somebody older living with you. And if that's the case and you don't want to drastically change everything and move people out of your house, you can say, look, I'm not going to play this year. Well, what happens then? When you come back, is that when your contract starts? So, there are a lot of little things that they need to work out like that.
No, you're right about that. And one thing I was thinking about when it comes to Blake Snell saying, I'm not going to play, is that he's actually doing or threatening to do what a lot of people around the country have already done. A lot of people that aren't millionaires. I mean, a lot of people out there know that I also drive for Uber, so I talk to a lot of essential workers because I have been driving during the pandemic. And so I've been driving a lot of essential workers to hospitals, but also to Amazon warehouses, that's essential, grocery stores, that's essential, restaurants. Two of those industries that started hiring in the last couple of months since the pandemic started were Amazon warehouses and grocery stores like Kroger and Meijer, but also some big box stores that sell groceries like Target and Walmart. And when I talk to these employees, I keep on saying, hey, so you guys still hiring? And they say, oh, yeah, we're hiring and we're getting pay increases. And I was like, well, why do you guys need to keep on hiring? And they give me two reasons. Reason number one is obviously increased demand from customers. If everybody's staying home, then they need to get more food and things like that. So that's why you have no toilet paper on the shelves. You go to Amazon. One employee told me that most of their deliveries from 2 months ago were for toilet paper and paper towel. But reason number two, a lot of current employees, a lot of their coworkers were either calling in sick or they were quitting due to the coronavirus. Those employees were not getting a pay cut down to $2.3 million. They're making $12, $15, maybe $18 an hour. They're being offered pay raises, and they're deciding to quit to preserve their health. If everyday people are doing that when they're not making $50,000 a year, I guess I can understand why Ian Snell or Blake Snell is threatening to do the same thing.
I don't know. It's really two worlds. Could you imagine if Miguel Cabrera came out and said, "Look, I've already got $300 million in the bank, but you know what? I'm 34 million I was due this year. Now I'm it for 18 million after taxes. That's only going to be 15. I'm not playing for that, man. I'm worried about my health." I can be like, "What? What's he talking about?" And for Snell, I think a lot of people look at that as well. Like, I'm only going to get $2 million. Look, I feel for people that have contracts and they're $7 million, and there is some negotiating to go on here for the players, so they can take on some risk and maybe they can get some deferred money. But more stories like this, the more people I want to see baseball. I'm waiting. I want to see everybody get a good deal, and I want to see baseball come around. But you know what? If we keep dragging our feet and we have more stories like this, at some point, we're going to be like, the hell with it, cancel it.
Well, and I one thing I wonder is how many players would be okay with that. Blake Snell said it. but he can't be the only one who's thinking it. I wouldn't be surprised if there are others who are saying the same thing, especially if perhaps they have a contract that's going to be expiring after this year. They're about to get their next big contract. I mean, you look at a guy like Snell. He was a Cy Young contender, but last year he only made $1 million. And for him to go from thinking he's going to get $7 million to $2.3 million, that's a monster drop. And then you also got to think about how many players in other sports are thinking like Blake Snell. Like, are there hockey players or basketball players or football players? Hockey and basketball are suspended right now. Are there some players out there saying, you know what, there's 20 games left in the season, my team's out of the playoffs. Like, if you're a Piston, I'm not going to come back for the final 20 games of the season when I could get coronavirus.
Yeah, I hear you on that. Oh, need to get this done here sooner than later. Less stories about Blake Ian Snell. Let's get it about complaining about the DH and the schedule and the expanded playoffs and how the Tigers aren't going to lose 100 games this year. All right, let's get to Chapter 2. And for that, the Green Bay Packers, you can buy a share of the Green Bay Packers and you can own a piece of the Packers. There's like an idea now with some of these professional teams where they really are hurting for cash, and it's like a mutual fund. There's some companies out there that are saying, hey, we'll buy a little bits and pieces, a small percentage of your team so you can get a influx of cash here, maybe, but we're going to own a little small percentage of your team. And I wanted to ask you, Brian, and everybody out there, if you could buy a piece of another team, or if you would go to what sport, which team, which sport would you go to if you could get out there and get a little bit of a mutual fund and buy and get a share of a team?
Well, if it comes down to the share of a team, what team I would most want to purchase right now or partially purchase right now, I'm going to throw you not a curveball. I'm going to throw you a Casey Mize split finger, because I would decline to purchase a share of any team right now because of the coronavirus. I get that they're hurting for cash and they want us to chip in, but the fact of the matter is that all of these sports teams are probably going to have their values plummet due to the coronavirus. Why put my money into a losing investment? You want to put your money into like a penny stock that's going to rise, or a solid stock that's going to rise and give you dividends and things like that. But when I think about, let's take for instance the Detroit Tigers. I mean, they've got money in Jordan Zimmerman and Miguel Cabrera and things like that you hope, or at least Zimmerman's going to be coming off the books. But when you look at the Detroit Tigers, not only are they a bad franchise, but they're not going to have fans coming to games in the 2020 season. That's going to hurt. In addition to that, they're not going to have as much advertising revenue coming in terms of TV, radio, and billboards, because guess what? You got car dealerships, you got injury attorneys, you got grocery stores and things like that have their profits sinking. And if their profits are sinking, they're not thinking, hey, let me go cut a check to the Detroit Tigers to be a presenting sponsor. When you got all those things going downward, no fans, no concessions, no advertising, that means I could buy a piece of the Tigers today, and by the end of the year, especially if there's another coronavirus outbreak, my investment could be worth 60% of what it was, 50% of it was, whatever it is. And I see that Jeff Passan wrote an article about what would happen if there was not a deal and MLB had to go without a season. He's talking about the possibility of baseball teams filing for bankruptcy and owners having to sell teams. I don't want to be a part of that. I would not buy stock in any professional team, baseball, football, basketball, or hockey right now. It's a losing investment.
I'll take a little piece of lacrosse. They're going to do something coming up next month, and like you can get in real low on that. It could be, something or this summer that people with nothing else going on or till anything gets going that people are really taking interest in, and it might be something that could take off a little bit. So give me a piece of lacrosse.
Lacrosse, yeah. Good luck with that. My experience with lacrosse, I got introduced to it when I was in elementary school, when we were in gym class and we had those lacrosse sticks that had the little bar in front to make sure that when you were cradling it, the lacrosse rubber ball wouldn't come out. Even with that bar, I couldn't get the ball to stay in. So after that, I was done with lacrosse. And lacrosse is, It's lower than soccer on the totem pole of American sports right now. It's below the four majors, below soccer, it's below UFC, it's below the dead sport of boxing, it's below golf, it's below tennis. My hand, by the way, is sinking to the floor right now. I mean, how much of your massive 50th fortune would you sink into the lacrosse league?
Little bit, little bit. I think that it's going to gain some traction here, and people are going to be talking about it a lot more because it's going to be the only thing out there.
I mean, when you add leagues into it, I would say that I would want a piece of the UFC. I don't like what they did on Saturday by having that fight after the fighter tested positive the previous day. I think it sets a bad example, and hopefully nobody else tests positive from that fight card or some of the arena attendees that were there. But the UFC has been growing for years. It continues to grow, and if they're going to continue to put fights out like they did last night, like they're going to do on Saturday, and they're really, really, really concerned about making a profit, and they don't have to worry about 800 to 2,000 athletes and personnel. It's only, a fighter and 3 or 4 people in the corner. I could see that growing even during this pandemic.
Well, at least you're picking something you like to invest your money in. I don't know anything. Your little spiel about lacrosse was a lot more than I have any knowledge about it. I knew Jim Brown played, so that was about it. So at least you're getting in on something that you like.
So you don't know anything about lacrosse, but
No.
You're saying, let me sink some of the 50th fortune into it and hope that it explodes.
Yeah, hey, you don't have to like computers back in the day to jump in on some Apple and, look what you already gone.
Oh, you're right about that, and I can tell you that, well, I like the UFC. I think it'd be hard to say that I was some super expert when it came to the UFC. It's fun to watch.
Hey, I'm like Blake Snell. Let me steal one of his lines. I want some money, or I want my money.
Yeah, I got to get mine.
Yeah. Let's go lacrosse in 2020.
All right, well, one guy who's already got a lot of money is Iron Mike Tyson, and that allows us to turn the page to the third chapter. He was once one of the nastiest men walking the face of the earth, one of the nastiest men in professional sports. He was knocking out guys in the first round. He was knocking out guys early in the first round, and he was not just a nasty man in the boxing ring, but of course out of the boxing ring. He went to prison for 3 years for rape. But over the last 15 years, he's calmed down. He hasn't chewed on Evander Holyfield's ear in about 22 years. He's gone on tour. He's doing shows. He's obeying the law. He's become a part of pop culture, and people are starting to embrace it. But he hasn't fought since 2005, and that might be about to change. Check out this video from TMZ. There you go. He finishes it by saying, "I'm back." Dennis, he's 53 freaking years old. 53-year-old Mike Tyson, and he's putting out that video where he looks vicious. He says, "I'm back." Are you interested in a Mike Tyson comeback?
Just a little bit. You know what? After I saw the video there, that's a pretty good hype video. When you think about some of the other stuff that goes on here, yeah, he's old. Evander's old. I know George Foreman, he fought when he was 44, 45, even all the way up to 48. But these guys now in their 50s, and what's Evander, like 48 years old? That seems ridiculous.
No,
but
Evander's 57.
57, that's what I'm talking about.
Yes.
That's crazy. He would be 58 in October. I looked it up so when they might meet. But you know what? We saw some craziness where Money Mayweather was fighting a UFC guy in McGregor. Get crazy. I want to see Tyson Mayweather, even though Mayweather is 5'8", 154 pounds, and Tyson's up to 240. I would watch that. You know what? Do I need a Holyfield Tyson? No. But would I gimmick it up and see, would I watch Mayweather, Tyson? I would.
Well, you know what? Speaking of Evander Holyfield, we've got Evander Holyfield's I'm Back video too. Let's play that for everybody at home.
I'm back.
And then it goes on to promote this Unite for Our Fight charity organization that he's talking about. And basically what he wants to do is he wants to not just come back, but he wants to fight Mike Tyson. And he thinks that he could do so for charity. Look, I get that Evander Holyfield is old. And when you looked at those two videos between 53-year-old Mike Tyson and 57-year-old Evander Holyfield looked like he was, I mean, he looks like he can still beat the crap out of me, but he also looked like he was about 15 years older in terms of his hand speed than Mike Tyson. So I know that Evander Holyfield won the first two fights, but I would put my money on Mike Tyson to win the third because he just looked mean. He just looked fast and a whole lot faster than Evander. Evander was just, he looked like he was, looking like he could punch out, some other 60-year-old washed-up fighters. But I know Mike Tyson couldn't get in there with a current heavyweight. But, man, that video looked like he almost hadn't lost a step. I would watch Holyfield versus Tyson 2. Or, I'm sorry, 3.
Yeah, it's deceiving. If we just went on those videos of that hype, that bag, that's reminding me a little bit of Tua Tagovailoa, man. He's throwing a little couple 5-yard out. Man, let's draft him. Who cares if he runs and everything? Who cares if they're 58? Who cares? 50's the new 40 or something like that, right?
Well, Mayweather's only 41, 42. So if they could market it like that, yeah, there's potential. Look, this would not be what folks were hoping for in the 1990s when they fought, 53-year-old versus 57 or 58-year-old. But I would watch it, and I could imagine. I mean, think about Mike Tyson in another hype video where he's punching, he's looking like he's 25 years old, and then you cut to him going to a dentist, getting his teeth sharpened, and saying, "This time I'm gonna get the rest of that ear, and I'm swallowing." Mike Tyson goes out to finish the job.
Gross.
Yeah, when I was preparing for the show, I actually went back and looked at that bite video. One of the craziest things in American sports. I mean, you're a big boxing fan. Were you watching that fight live?
Yes, I was. I remember exactly where I was in Livonia at my friend's house. We were watching that one, and we all jumped up when that happened. That was the end of boxing, really. That for me, that time. I mean, I was into it. It was like every sport out there. But after that, not so much. Just a couple fights. Although there have been a couple fighters that I will take in. Just a few guys since then, which gets us to where we came up with this chapter here, because somebody responded to one of our promo tweets about boxing, didn't they, Chapman?
Yeah, that's right. We got a tweet coming in from Bart. And here's what he had to say about the possibility of Mike Tyson returning to the ring.
Hey, Dennis and Brian, the 5th chapter. I tell you guys, I would much rather see Devontae Wilder and Tyson Fury 2 or Triple G and Alvarez fight before I see Tyson. That's what I would pay for, personally. But Tyson was the man back in the day, but I'm not sure I'd pay to see him fight right now.
And there you go. We appreciate that tweet there from Bart. And so he wouldn't pay to see Tyson fight, and he wouldn't pay to see these washed-up fighters fight. He wants to see Triple G, and I get, when it comes to who's in their prime right now, guys like Triple G are there. But he sounds like he's a boxing aficionado. He sounds like he's a boxing super fan. I'm not. Most sports fans out there aren't. Most sports fans out there say that boxing is dead. And if you think that boxing is dead, then is another Triple G fight, he has what, 1 or 2 a year, going to get you to watch? Or is Iron Mike Tyson, 53 years old, versus Evander Holyfield, 57 years old, going to be more likely to get you to watch, especially if you think this time Tyson's going to get the rest of the year?
Yeah, well, I'm with Bart, man. I would watch Triple G and Alvarez, man. Those guys put together 2 great fights, man. That there, that would be something I would throw down $79.99. I wouldn't pay 99 cents to watch Tyson fight. And you know what? The other Tyson Fury, he doesn't look much like a boxer, but he put Wilder on his back. I thought Wilder was going to kill him. I would love to see those guys fight again. That was good boxing. Come on, man. I want to go watch somebody who's 157 years old?
Yes, that's what I want. But
I know you do.
The one issue I have, though, is these guys have been out of it for so long, and they're both well over 50, especially with how hard Mike Tyson appeared to be throwing his punches in that promo video. If close to 60-year-old Evander Holyfield takes 5 or 6 shots from Iron Mike Tyson to the head, it's one thing to rebound from that and you're 28 years old. The dude's 58 years old. I mean, is he going to have lasting brain damage? Is he going to be paralyzed as he walks out of the boxing ring? I mean, I'm not as concerned about Mike Tyson, although he is in his upper 50s, just because Evander Holyfield was throwing punches with the speed of Miguel Cabrera rounding the bases on a single. But Evander Holyfield, if he takes one of those punches to the head from Iron Mike Tyson, even at 53, he might not walk again.
I could just imagine they're gonna wheel him up in walkers and wheelchairs and canes. I mean, come on.
Yeah, that's right. But the other thing that interests me about this potential fight between Evander Holyfield and Mike Tyson, Part 3, is that they would be doing this for charity. And I know that you said you wouldn't pay 99 cents to watch it.
No.
Well, I would pay. I mean, I don't want to pay $100, but if I could go and, hopefully after the pandemic ends, go to a friend's place and watch it for a discounted rate, I think this could generate tens of millions of dollars, maybe 50, maybe 100 million. I saw the eye roll, maybe $100 million. And they'd be donating that to charity, maybe coronavirus charity. Compare that to the racist, illiterate, woman-beating, tax-avoiding Floyd Mayweather, who's unfortunately from Michigan. He goes around setting up all these boring fights that people buy for some reason and then pockets all the money for himself only to not pay his taxes on time. What a contradiction.
Imagine what's Mayweather, 41 years old, so in like 16 years, they're going to be coming back and he's going to fight Pacquiao again. Guys are, close to 60. I've had enough of that. I said I wouldn't pay 99 cents, but I've been paying $30 a month for live sports on cable. I might as well flush that money down. There hasn't been anything going on there. Hey, I'm like Snell, man. I want my money there. I'm right with him tonight. Let's get to the next chapter. A real battle, Chapman, and that's for if there's going to be a college football season. More on that in some upcoming shows. But if there is going to be a college football season and they're going to play college football at the Big House, the question is, who's going to be the quarterback for the Wolverines? It was Shea Patterson last year. Now you have a redshirt junior in Dylan McCaffrey, and you have a redshirt sophomore in this corner in Joe Milton. There's the tail of the tape. Who do you think gets the nod in your feel here in mid-May?
Well, I'm going to go with whichever quarterback is wearing number 98. Go with the defensive tackle because we know that's the Michigan tradition. Whoever's wearing the number 98 starts the quarterback. But no, look, I probably have a different view of this than you do and a lot of other Michigan fans. Look,
because you're going to make jokes about the Legends jerseys?
Yeah, that. But also, like, if I have to pick a name I'll go with Dylan McCaffrey because last year he was higher on the depth chart. He was the number 2 quarterback. I know that Josh Gaddis, the offensive coordinator, spoke to the media earlier today, and he said that it doesn't matter what the depth chart was last year. And actually, I can put that up on the screen. So for some of you that didn't hear what he said earlier today, didn't read what he said, I can share that with you. And he said, we're in a 3-man competition coming into the spring with Joe Milton, Dylan McCaffrey, and Cade McNamara. McNamara is entering his redshirt freshman season. And no one's got a competitive advantage over anyone. We're excited about the guys we have on the roster. We've got to solve that question later down the road when we get the opportunity to. But no one has a leg up. It's not based on depth chart last year. So I think, he can say that it's not based on the depth chart last year, but I think that to begin with, you have to go on that because, number one, they don't have any spring practices, so we can't see who's making a surge, who's starting to hit those receivers in the small window, who's becoming a leader on the field. But number two, when all 3 of those guys were on the roster last year, Cade McNamara didn't play. He redshirted. Joe Milton was the number 3 quarterback, and Dylan McCaffrey was the number 2. So if I'm trying to decide who's going to be the starting quarterback next year, it's going to be the guy with the most experience. It's going to be the guy who the coaches last year thought was the guy best suited to fill in if Shea Patterson had an injury.
Well, I heard, you mentioned Devin Gardner, old number 98, wearing the jersey from a couple years ago and the Legends jersey. Word has it, well, he said it, that he's been working with Joe Milton. And the one thing we know about Milton is he has an absolute cannon. If we're talking about arm strength, and if we're talking about who's the better pocket passer, who passes the look test, and who has the arm, that's Milton, man. He can throw it a country mile, and he's more of a, what you'd say, pro-style quarterback. Although he is an athletic guy, he can move around. We saw a little bit of that. He had that touchdown run last year. He came up in mop-up duty. But it's always going to come down for him with the accuracy and where he's really come along in that department. We don't know that. We can go on what some of the stuff that we've heard, and Gardner says he is taking big strides there. But McCaffrey, if we're basing it on what we have seen from him, even in limited action in games, man, this guy's got that it factor. And the it factor is something like when he tucks the ball and runs, man, he is shot out of a cannon. And, man, he is a dual threat. He is exciting as can be. The biggest detraction, I think you say, for McCaffrey is, of course, the injuries. He's been knocked out 2 times because he is a runner. And so I would say this, that there's a lot of people, I saw that Nick Bumgardner, who knows a thing or two about Michigan football, he was asked to guess who he thought would be the quarterback next year, and he said Joe Milton. And he based it on his size and his durability, what appeared to be his durability. I also saw a guy who follows Michigan, Isaiah Hole, who just made his predictions this last week. He's been somebody that's covered Michigan for a while. He predicted that it would also be Joe Milton, and he talked about his intangibles. Now, that's what he said. He didn't elaborate on what he thought the intangibles were for Joe Milton, but there's 2 guys, and I don't think these guys are just, taking a swing at it, making a guess. But, for me, if McCaffrey's healthy, you don't say, well, you know what, he's been knocked out for years. If he's 100%, and he looks like he's leading the team better, and you know that he's got that it factor, I would put my money on Dylan McCaffrey being the starter for the Wolverines.
Well, I'll say this. I agree with you that it's going to be McCaffrey, but I wouldn't put any money on it because, look, neither one of these guys has done squat. I believe last year they combined to throw 27 passes, and they were 13 for 27. I know a lot of Michigan fans earlier in the year last year were saying, oh, they got to stick McCaffrey in there. They got to stick McCaffrey. Look at how well he can run, and Shea Patterson's struggling throwing passes deep down the field. But the bottom line is, when McCaffrey or a Milton or a Cade McNamara, you have to throw him in there as well, does it really matter? Does it really matter if you're a Michigan fan if it's McCaffrey, Milton, or McNamara? Because last year, Shea Patterson did not get drafted. Okay, that says what you need to know about how great Shea Patterson was when he came from Ole Miss to try to make it Ole Miss. He was so good, he didn't get drafted. And not only were McCaffrey and Milton backing up a future undrafted quarterback, they were so bad that they didn't even force a quarterback controversy with Shea Patterson. We didn't see one of them step in and start a game. We saw, I believe it was McCaffrey step in when Patterson got hurt during the Notre Dame game a little bit. But they didn't force Patterson, a future undrafted quarterback, to get benched. Why be excited about a pair of guys who can't snatch the job away from a guy who couldn't even get drafted? And then when he was signed, it wasn't like 3 seconds after the draft ended. It was like 3 or 4 days after the draft ended. I wouldn't be excited about any of these guys.
Well, it was 2 years ago at Notre Dame when Patterson got banged up that McCaffrey came in and he looked pretty good, actually moved the team. And last year, Harbaugh was saying before the season that the idea was that both of them were going to play. And in that first game, we did see both of them out there. Now, the offense was really clumsy, and I think it was their big plan of attack to have them both out there, and that was going to be one of their tricks that they had up their sleeve. But that really backfired on them. And then McCaffrey got hurt. So, there was a huge stretch in there, and he just fell behind and was never able to get back there on the field. And as for Milton, I mean, we're talking about last year as a redshirt sophomore, and we knew that he was going to be a guy that had to develop too. Just because somebody in Milton and McCaffrey's situation, it's easy to see with the injury. But with Milton, just because he didn't overtake Patterson doesn't mean that he can't come on and be an outstanding quarterback and be one of those guys that, I think both of these guys, I mean, for sure McCaffrey, but it surprised me that if either of these guys ended up being one of the better quarterbacks in the Big Ten. I mean, they have that kind of talent.
I mean, if you want to say they can be better than a Rutgers quarterback, you can be better than a Maryland quarterback. I mean, perhaps, but you talk about one of the better quarterbacks in the Big Ten. I mean, they're never going to be better. At least I have to see it before I believe it when it becomes better than an Ohio State quarterback, whether it's Justin Fields or whoever comes in after him. Tanner Morgan looks like he's going to have a great third season. Sean Clifford, he was okay last year at Penn State, but I'd take him.
Not bad.
Yeah, I would take him over whoever Michigan throws out there. But, I mean, it doesn't take much to unseat an undrafted quarterback, and we've seen guys in their freshman, whether it's true freshmen or redshirt freshmen or sophomore years, lead teams to greatness. We saw Jameis Winston lead his team to the national championship game and win the Heisman Trophy as a redshirt freshman. We saw Trevor Lawrence get talk about being a Heisman Trophy winner as a freshman and a sophomore. We saw Justin Fields in his second year playing college football go to the Heisman Trophy ceremony. So I get that Joe Milton doesn't have a whole lot of experience, but he's been in college just as long as Justin Fields, and Fields was one of the best quarterbacks in all of football, and he had to transfer learning a new system while Milton rode the bench. I'm not excited about any of these guys.
Well, if you compare him to Fields, I get that. Hey, I think McCaffrey and Milton are already better than Rocky Lombardi, but, that's just me.
No, that's true. Also, McCaffrey and Milton were both recruited by J.I. Block M. Harbaugh out of high school, right?
Yes.
How is Harbaugh's resume with QBs he's recruited out of high school at the University of Michigan?
Yeah, it hasn't been good.
No,
I mean, he hasn't been good against Ohio State. He hasn't been really good with the quarterback position. We get that. I mean, that's fair. It is.
And it's been so bad that he has to keep on bringing in transfer quarterbacks. First, Rudock, who got drafted in the 6th round. Then O'Korn, who didn't get drafted. And then Shea Patterson, who didn't get drafted. And you look at the guys that have come in since he's been the head coach. 2015 4-star quarterback Alex Malzone. He was recruited by Brady Hoke, but he was part of Jim Harbaugh's first partial draft or recruiting class. Attempted 0 passes for Michigan because Harbaugh couldn't develop him. And then he went to Miami of Ohio, transferred there, and threw 4 total passes. He was a bust. 2016 4-star recruit Brandon Peters. He came in. He was a disappointment. Transferred to Illinois after splitting time with John O'Korn, and he was pretty good for an Illinois quarterback, but a disappointment overall for Michigan. He should
have played in that Michigan State in that rain game over O'Korn. Harbaugh messed that one up.
Well, The fact that Harbaugh thought it was debatable between O'Korn and Peters shows you what you need to know about how Peters developed. And then in 2017, Dylan McCaffrey came in. He's thrown 35 passes. You can talk about injuries, but if he's going to be a great player, if Harbaugh's a great quarterback developer, then I'm not saying he has to be Trevor Lawrence or he has to be Jameis Winston or he has to be Tua Tagovailoa, but we can't even call McCaffrey a poor man's Tua. We can't even call Milton a poor man's Trevor Lawrence. I'm not excited about any of these guys this far. Harbaugh's best recruited quarterback at Michigan has been Brandon Peters, and he wanted out.
Yeah, well, I put Shane Morris in that mix, too, right off the bat. Rudock ended up beating him out. He transferred out, too.
Yeah, there you go.
Where'd he go, Central?
Yeah, Shane Morris, he went to Central Michigan. He played a little bit for CMU, and then that was it. Dennis, before the show.
Before you're done dogging Michigan, let's move on, right?
Well, I don't want to move on because before the show, you put up a poll on Twitter.
Oh, right.
That's right. And you wanted to ask people what they thought about the quarterback battle at the University of Michigan, whether they wanted to go with Dylan McCaffrey or Joe Milton. You didn't include McNamara. And right now with 225 votes in, 72.4% agree with us that the starting quarterback will be Dylan McCaffrey. So if you want to vote on that, there's still 16 hours left. Make sure that you follow Dennis Fithian at Dennis Fithian and you vote accordingly. Of course, you can also send in your tweets at BChap Sports. Now, Dennis, if you're ready, we can turn the page to the fifth chapter.
Yeah, I'm tired of you dogging Michigan. Let's go.
Hey, just stating the facts. Now, in the fifth chapter, we turn to story time, and this is an opportunity for Dennis and I to share with you what's going on in our lives as we deal with the pandemic and let you know how we're hanging in there. And let's start off with the man, the fifth, the legend, Dennis Fithian.
Well, this week there's two games that I went back and watched. About a month ago, I did go and watch the 5-game sweep that the Pistons had over the Lakers in 2004, and I enjoyed watching all 5 of those games. But this week I went in, I was playing cards on Friday, and on YouTube, I punched up Michigan and Miami 1988. Michigan lost to, Bo Schembechler lost to Jimmy Johnson 31-30. Michigan was up 16 points with under 7 minutes to go. They really blew it. But what stood out in that game, Chap, is that it was Bob Greasy. He was the color man with Keith Jackson. These guys didn't talk about any controversial plays, any close plays, anything that had to do with referees, except once, late in the game, Greg McMurtry on a third down, who wore the one jersey for Michigan, had a very close, tight wire type sideline right in front of Jimmy Johnson, and one ref called it a catch, and then Jimmy Johnson was in front of the other guy going like this, and he ended up, I think, getting intimidated by Johnson and said he bobbled it, but Greasy was like, oh, that was a close one, and Jackson said too, but that's what struck me, because you'll get 3 or 4 like, ooh, that's close, I could go either way, or they're going up to the booth and everything else. I mean, that was a long time ago, 1988, but it was such a difference just watching a game without having the announcers just sit there and look at play after play and, and cut it up and talk about this and that. It just moved on. It had a better flow, it felt like. And the other game I watched was just a couple nights ago. I went back to 1996 and watched the World Cup of hockey, where the USA beat Canada in the best of 3 in the third game up in Montreal. They were down 2-1 in the third and then threw 4 goals up on Cujo and ended up winning the gold. But you know what? A lot of Hall of Famers for the Canadian side, guys like Yzerman and Gretzky and Lindros. But man, the United States topped them that time, and it was pretty cool. Great hockey, though. I remembered that it was great hockey because in '96 it took place on a Saturday in September, a college football Saturday, and we were watching on one of the TVs hockey on a college football Saturday, which said a lot. But man, everybody was watching the hockey, and it was like, wow, this is great hockey. Sometimes you say that. But I wanted to know if it stood the test of time, and I went back and watched it, and it did. Doc Emmerich and John Davidson were on the call. And again, I watched that on YouTube, and it did. It was awesome. So 2 games that I had fun watching.
Yeah, well, it's interesting that you mentioned that, what was it, back in the 80s you were watching that football game, and they only brought up one time when they were looking back at a play with the referees, it just shows you how much things have changed when it comes to technology. Because back then, they probably had, I don't know, a quarter or maybe a fifth of the number of cameras at a football stadium. You also didn't have HD. You didn't have slow motion replay. And because of that, I mean, you pretty much have to. You pretty much have to, if you're a network, look at the replay because everybody's going to see it. And it adds to the experience when you can say, oh, I don't know if he caught that. Because if you're watching it back in the 80s, they say, and you think as a fan, I don't know if he caught that. They just gloss over it and go to the next play and you just won't know. But nowadays you can say, wait a second. Let me see. Wait a second. Did his toe touch a blade of grass? Wait a second. Did that pinky finger touch him when he was down or did he get up? So it does show how much things have changed when you look at adding in HD technology as well as additional cameras. As for my story, as many of you guys know, I'm not just in the media. I'm also a driver for Uber. I also drive for Lyft. And I've got a ton of stories about my riders that I can share. And one of the things that I've gained a greater appreciation for over the last several years of driving is the struggle that heroin addicts go through. Because I'm sure that I was like a lot of people when I first heard about heroin and how, you know, this just has to be some, you know, drug addiction like anything else where you get some discipline, you lock down for a month, you maybe take a couple of drugs so that you don't have to deal with the withdrawals, you go through the withdrawals, and then after 30 days you're good to go. And now after talking to lots and lots of current and former heroin addicts, I realized that it's not that easy. And actually a couple of weeks ago, I was driving a guy who said he had been clean for a few months. I think it was like 8 or 9 months. And he was volunteering at a drug rehab facility to help others in recovery. And I asked him about how tough it was to quit heroin. And he told me that opioids play mind games with you. I was like, well, what do you mean mind games? And he gave me this example. He said that he had over a dozen friends and acquaintances who had died from opioid overdoses. I don't know anybody personally who's died from an opioid overdose, but he had over a dozen. And he said, when you lose a best friend due to an overdose, you're obviously very sad and you mourn. But he said, one of the thoughts that goes through your head is, I wonder where he got that dope. Because if he OD'd on it, it must have been some good stuff. And I was just floored. Because he said it and it was crazy. He knew that it was crazy. But it just goes to show you how much heroin can take control of you and can play mind games with you when somebody that you've known for potentially a long period of time can get addicted like he did, like he was at the time, can overdose and die, and he's thinking, man, I got to get some of that stuff because it must be strong and it must be good.
Chap, you know what? You are a member of the dishonest media, but it seems like you're a member of the honest Uber driving club. So, good story.
Yeah, I
good
try.
story.
And good for that guy to try to give back after he beat heroin to try to help others to get through it in the future.
Yeah, good story there, chap. Well, you know what? That's going to do it here. Make sure you hit those buttons. Put a rating out there for us. Get us subscribing. We love having you shooting us some videos here. And don't forget, we're on Tuesdays and Thursdays live here. It's Detroit Sports on YouTube, sports and entertainment here with Brian Chapman and Dennis Fith. And that's 8:30 Tuesdays and Thursdays. And coming up on Tuesday, what's Miggy's approval rating? Also, stay tuned for a big surprise on June the 2nd. Chapman doesn't even know what it is. Everybody have a great night. Thanks for tuning in.
He represents the mitten by way of Penn State. When Chapman gets to talking sports, the people can't wait. He represents the mitten. Be a true EMU, but cut Dennis in the fall, and his veins bleeding blue. They got respect around the state. When that light turns red, so don't sleep on these dudes. Just invite your friends to cut your nap short and tip your cap for and sit back for the Fith chapter. Brian Chapman. Dennis Fithian. When they open their mouths, they spitting the facts, bro. This ain't even optional, man. You just have to tune into YouTube to watch the broadcast or download it to your phone to peep the podcast. They mix laughter, they get after. It's all captured in the 5th chapter.